Good morning. Thank you, Katie and Jeremy and the whole crew for inviting me here today to the American Sign Museum, for letting us use this incredible space. To all of you, I'm truly humbled to see so many friends and people who have trusted me to tattoo them, and people who are truly my heroes in this room. And I feel typically much more comfortable being in the chair and listening to you guys, and I know there's so much wisdom in this room. And the amazing things that are happening in this city, I'm super excited as a Cincinnati native, and that is largely because of the people who are here. So thank you for your time this morning. Talking about commitment, it did cross my mind to cancel this morning because I get nervous about these things still. But here I am. I'm going to practice what I preach, and I can go for 30 minutes just telling bad commitment jokes. I am a dad, so dad jokes are always on the radar. Here are my three beautiful kids, Naomi on the left, Isaiah in the middle, Isabel on the right, and their amazing stepmother, my wife Becky, who I'm super grateful for. And truly, what I do today, White Whale Tattoo, would not exist without her. She's incredible, so thank you, Becky, for being here this morning. So that is my family. Let's see what else we got on here. This is the building where White Whale Tattoo currently lives. This building we sold our house to purchase. We were looking for a small studio that we could live above, like an apartment, and launch our business. And this was about 4 years ago that we were out on this journey. And we kept coming back to this building. We had lived in and around Walnut Hills for years now, and really wanted to be there. And this building was empty. It was owned by a guy named Vladimir Putin. I kid you not. So that felt a little weird to be signing a contract. Well, we were at this place in our life, and this is after a super long journey that I'll share a little bit with you, where we were like, let's just go all in. And this thing might fail, and maybe we're crazy. People told us we were crazy. But we were renovating this building, and we're like, well, maybe we'll get like a really cool cafe or like a bar next door, and maybe other people will move in, because there were 8 apartments, not 1. And we can have a great little creative community. And that happened about 3 years ago when we purchased the building, and it's happened. It's totally surpassed my imaginations. So I'm just super grateful. But if you ever drive by McMillan, stop in and see us. Of course, you can get great coffee and beer next door at Landlocked Social House. And we're right down the street from Video Archive, which is one of my favorite spots in the city. So lots of great things happening in that neighborhood. This is my crew at White Whale. Again, I wanted to have a private studio. It was the only thing that I had dreamed up at the time. And then these amazing artists just kept showing up. And to me, like, this was like my baby, right? So for people to show up who have integrity and who are extremely talented artists was just kind of mind-blowing. So, that's me on the left, obviously. Next to me is Annie Bone, my wife Becky, Zach Mueller, Nikki Wolcha, M. Seitz Carnes, and Jacqueline Hastings. Many of which are DAP graduates. Jacqueline studied at Savannah College of Art and Design, illustration, and all of them had a very unique style of art that I had not really seen in tattooing, so it was interesting to explore how their art would look as a tattoo. So that's kind of the White Whale crew there. So when I think about tattoos and commitment, one of the things I hear, I just heard it yesterday, I've really thought about getting a tattoo, but I don't know of anything that I can commit to. And it is a big commitment, and it's a big trust issue to find someone that you trust to get it right the first time. When I tattoo, I commit to every line. And when I first started tattooing about 12 years ago, it was to get my head around that. If I had any ounce of doubt at all, it's going to show up in my work. So you have to kind of play this mental game to get to a place where every single line or every single dot that you do, you're committing to that because you get one shot at it, and otherwise it's really hard to remove, right, or to cover up. So I think in some ways that applies. On a bigger journey for me, commitment is about the things I used to be committed to versus the things that I'm committed to now. So to say a little bit about that, if you know, anybody heard of the Joseph Campbell, the hero narrative? So that is a very helpful narrative for a lot of people to kind of locate themselves into where you are on your particular journey. For me, it's called the U-shaped journey. So my graduate thesis is called the U-shaped journey. It's called A Sign of Jonah. And so I had been at this place in my life where for most of my life, I had been committed to trying to be good. I had been really committed to trying to be perfect. Anybody in here taking the Enneagram test? So yeah, lots of people. That's awesome. The Enneagram, I think, for me, has been the single most helpful tool in my own personal development, and also in understanding my friends and my other relationships. Highly recommend taking that. If you just Google free Enneagram test, take the classical test, see if it resonates, and I honestly would love to hear your thoughts on it. So my wife, Becky, is a type 7. She's an enthusiast. She's actually on the Enneagram a healthy model of growth for me as a type 1. I'm a perfectionist. So she helps me every day see how I could live in a very relaxed way. So if you think about a perfectionist, a lot of my models, a lot of my mentors were perfectionists. And a lot of times I never felt that I was good enough. No matter how good I was, I still never really felt like I got that good job or here's your blessing, right? So I spent a lot of my life doing that. My grandmother, to go way back, was a Romany gypsy. She lived in a caravan in England. She married an American soldier, and they came here, and she really wanted to get rid of her identity. At the time, her people were persecuted very heavily, so coming to America was a new start, and I think she was really trying to find herself. But she had 15 kids when she came here, which is huge, and my grandmother has made incredible sacrifices. But I also hear a lot of stories of my mother who grew up they fell on hard times. There was a lot of poverty there. There was a lot of abuse there. And so when I look at my family, it's very difficult for me to go to family reunions because there's just so much brokenness, and it's really, really hard. So for my own personal journey, I also grew up, I think for our family, religion was a bit of a container to control some of that chaos. And there was some pretty interesting, I would go so far as to say bad theology that I was raised with. And I was raised very afraid all the time. I thought that no matter how good I was going to burn in hell, right? And I was very urgent that my friends didn't do that too. So as a kid, I grew up in a world that was very fearful. There was a lot of scarcity. So when you're operating from that place, you tend to hoard, right? Because there's not enough. You are always anxious. And so I used that as fuel for a lot of my life to try and feel like maybe I could attain perfection. Maybe I could escape hell, So I got my undergraduate degree in literature at University of Cincinnati. I wanted to be an artist, and people had said, you'll be a starving artist. You can't do that. So I thought I'd be a starving literature teacher instead. I don't know what I was thinking there. I just knew that I loved to read. So it's well, I can read and get a degree for it. So I did that. And then even when I got that degree, I was the first in my family to go to college. So I didn't have that blessing. I didn't hear the good job. And I was wait, I worked so hard for this, and still I'm not there. And I didn't realize this at the time, but then I got my graduate degree, and my graduate degree is in theology of mission, and it's largely because I was in Guatemala and I was working in these communities in the garbage dump, the basurero, and in another community where these indigenous leaders were just like killing it. Like the things that I think some of us are trying to do here in Cincinnati, they were just doing this amazing work, and it blew my mind. And there was a degree attached to that, so I was just trying to study and learn kind of a different, I think, operating system than what I had growing up. So when I got my graduate degree again, I just felt like I still wasn't there after all of this. So at some point in my life, I realized that I needed to stop chasing that blessing, and that the biggest blessing I could ever get was from myself. That I was good enough no matter what. And that took me, like, to be honest, through a lot of asking really difficult questions about theology in particular. Like, I had heard that, like, God is love, so why does God need to kill his son to save us all from hell? Like, those things didn't, you know, and I don't want to, like, get into that too deep here. We need a few beers, I think, before we can talk about that. But I had to really ask some hard questions and do some soul searching and ask what I believed, because most of my belief system up to that point was actually kind of a transaction, and there wasn't a whole lot of belief, if you get me. So for the first time in my life, that just stopped working for me. I couldn't do it anymore. And so I got this tattoo of St. Elizabeth of Hungary. This is about 12 years ago. And St. Elizabeth was the patron saint of gypsies and homeless people. And I had sold my house because I just needed to get out of North America. I needed to get away from George W. Bush. I needed to get away from my religion. You know, I just needed like a break. And so I sold my house, and I literally just fled to Guatemala. I had been there once before to visit a friend, and it was this beautiful country. I used some of that money to create a 6-month sabbatical where I didn't have any strings attached. I could do whatever I wanted, and I started to ask myself, maybe for the first time in my life, what I wanted to do. And I would set up a few things, like I was going to go volunteer in a gang prison, and then I'd wake up that morning, and I just would be like, I can't do that today. I don't have it in me. And I got to ask myself for the first time for 6 months, do I want to do that or do I not want to do that? And I didn't have to report anywhere. And, you know, that might have been a waste of money for 6 months, but it truly changed me. And so when I talk about a U-shaped journey, you can see how the first part of my life, I was just like crashing, right? And then I hit this point, I get this tattoo of St. Elizabeth. I really hit it off with the tattoo artist. And then I leave, and I go to Guatemala, and I spend 6 months kind of at the bottom of the U, which really turned into about another year after that. And everything fell apart for me. My first marriage fell apart. I came back and got a part-time job, and that lost, and I lost a lot of my community with the divorce. And it felt like almost a year of death. And the interesting thing was, I was so kind of tired of it all that I was kind of okay with it, but I was also very hopeful that there would be something better. There would be a better way of living, I think, on the other side of that. So this is getting really heavy. I didn't know we were gonna go here. I should look at my notes. So I come back, and the biggest part of it, I'm on top of the Empire State Building in New York when I come back to Cincinnati from Guatemala, and I feel this pain. I thought that maybe my appendix burst, but it was your appendix is over here. This was on the left side. And then it hurts really bad for like an hour, and then it kind of goes away, and I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe it was that food I had this morning in a sketchy restaurant. What happened was my colon perforated. And the pain comes back very strong, to the point where I'm literally saying, I'm ready to go. Like, if we can't fix this now, I want this to end. So it was as if I had been ignoring my gut up until that point. Literally, like relationships, jobs, I would have well-meaning mentors say, you should do this or you should do that. Like, you should go to college here and you shouldn't study art. And every time I could hear my gut saying, I just wanted to be good. I just wanted a blessing. But I was ignoring myself. So this was my gut saying, if you don't listen to me, you're gonna die, right? Like, it was like and I needed that. I really was that deaf to my own voice. So this was kind of the bottom of what I call my U-shaped journey. And my theology degree gave me kind of an operating system, a new one. It's like the old operating system had crashed and I needed to replace it. And it really felt like, for me, learning a new language, learning to walk and talk again. Because I was going to start making decisions trusting my gut, which I had always been told to ignore that's a bad thing. And that was really frightening to me. So the thing that I can say most about that, there's a philosopher named Rene Girard who has been hugely tremendous in my own life. And Girard says that his biggest theory is called mimetic theory, that if you stick your tongue out at a baby long enough, the baby will start sticking the tongue out as well, and that we're full of mirror neurons. So we mimic the things around us. And so this Western individual idea that we're all unique snowflakes is cute, but maybe not so true. So Girard would say, even if you're reacting against your models, like maybe you're not happy with your parents or your mentors, and you're still mimicking in some way. So for me, that became about choosing your models. And I really did have some incredible mentors and friends and professors who would let me come spend a week at their house and drinking whiskey and crying and talking about God. It was just a big mess, right? But gave me a new operating system and would say, like, if you have the faith to ask that maybe the world is actually an abundant place. Like, what if, start asking these questions. What if, like, you chased your dreams and it actually happened? And so I got to tell you that I'm still learning how to do that. I think I might spend 5 or 10 minutes a day meditating on the idea that it's actually a safe and abundant place, and there's actually more than enough, and that you can make decisions and you're going to be okay, and that maybe even failures turn out to be a huge blessing for you. So that's a big part of what I'm going through here with Mimeticism. This past week, this is a white whale tattoo. Becky and I really wanted to create a place that felt very welcoming, that you could come in and you could feel safe and we could have real conversation, that you would get a beautiful piece of art. And it shouldn't feel like you're scared to walk in or someone's gonna shit on your idea, right? Like, this should be a great experience. So that was White Whale Tattoo. This past week, Becky and I got to spend, this is Herman Melville's house. So I got to see the room where Melville wrote Moby Dick, which is one of my favorite novels. Obviously, the shop is named after it. But to see that study, that place where he wrote it, was just so incredible for me. And it was like a bit of a pilgrimage. So as we talk about kind of mentors and models here, then we spent a few days with this incredible human named Barry Moser, who is my all-time favorite artist. He's been called the greatest living illustrator and engraver. And he is the grandpa I never had. He let us stay in his guest room for 3 nights. He cooked us dinner. He picked out a beer that was a tip of the hat to White Whale and showed us his studio and how he works. And we just had an incredible time. So another one of those models, because at this point in my life, I realized I get to pick my models, right? And he's just an incredible human. He's 78 years old and he's still making politically subversive art, and it's just amazing. I hope I'm that awesome when I'm 78. And this is Barry in front of, I just thought it was his library. These are all books he's illustrated, and it's maybe half of them. He's incredible. This is one of my tattoos that is based off of one of Barry's pieces. So all line work. I've always been really drawn to woodcut and pointillism. And I hadn't seen anyone doing that in tattooing, so I asked the guy who apprenticed me to do this Jonah or Ishmael, depending on who you're talking to, woodcut tattoo, and it turned out really great. And I was super happy with the integrity that the lines would hold up, that the dots would hold up. So a lot of my tattooing blends kind of a woodcut, wood engraving, pointillism. This is a heron I did, if anybody knows Over the Rhine. This is my friend Karen Berquist, and that's also one of Barry Moser's pieces. So I share those to show you the influence that Barry has had on my life. This is my buddy Corbin, and this is based off of a Gustave Doré. Doré, another incredible, he's not living anymore, incredible woodcut, wood engraving artist. And one more. This is Tanya. One of the things we do at White Whale, we take our whole crew down to Guatemala once a year. Obviously, when I moved down there, I fell in love with the country. And just people doing unbelievable work. And if you want to read a little bit of the history of U.S. relations with Guatemala, I highly recommend a book called Bitter Fruit. When you grow up, and this again is this operating system thing, thinking that we live in the greatest country in the world, and in a lot of ways we really do, but we also have a lot of dirty laundry that's hidden, and we have done a lot of damage in Guatemala. And even the fact that the Basurero and the La Limonada, which is one of the biggest urban slums, exists because of U.S. relations with Guatemala. So we support these local organizations. Tanya is a sex worker. She decided when she lived in El Salvador that she wanted to be a woman, and she was a woman. So she became a woman. Her family disowned her. She fled to Guatemala thinking she could get work, could not get any work except for sex work. Her dream is to be a hairstylist, so we tattooed the word love on her neck, made out of like hair styling instruments. So this for us is just a way that we can give back. When we wrote that business plan together, Becky and I wanted to be sure that a huge portion of our profit went to different local and global nonprofits who were doing this kind of very difficult work. Luis, this is one of my all-time favorite tattoos in the world. Luis was one of the founding members of the MS-13 gang in Guatemala. He grew up living in the garbage dump. He and his friends were tired of scavenging garbage for a living, so they started a gang. Most of their fathers were killed in the Civil War, so the gang was their family. And Luis had a big 13 on his arm, and he lived in fear because once he decided to leave the gang, he could still be killed just for having a gang tattoo. Or he could be thrown back in prison just for having a gang tattoo. So when he sold cupcakes on the bus, is what he does now for a living, to feed his family, he wanted to cover up with this big cupcake tattoo, and he picked the colors. This is, you think this big, manly, scary Guatemalan gang member, and here we go. That's Luis. So that's Nikki did that tattoo, and Annie had designed that one because Annie hadn't gone with us. And this is what it's all about for me. We just got this the other day. This gal, Brenda, she also grew up in the garbage dump. She scavenged garbage, and one day a garbage truck ran over her leg, and she got this huge infection and this huge scar. And she was really embarrassed about it. So Annie did a cover-up tattoo for her, and it says, if you speak Spanish, don't judge me because my Spanish isn't great. But my translation is this: hi, good morning. I would like to share with you that I've had my tattoo for 5 months, and it's very beautiful and precious to me. It makes me feel super secure, and that I never have to go back to that horrible scar that I got from the garbage truck. Thank you to you all for the time that you shared, and overall to Annie, thank you so much for making one of my dreams a reality. So, and this is the tattoo, the cover-up that she got, and there's Annie with her. So that's what it's all about for us. It doesn't get any better than that for us at White Whale. And I think the most incredible thing is that when you learn to trust in yourself and you follow your dreams, that not only are you happier, right? But that love that you live in and that choice that this is an abundant world, it starts to overflow on the people around you. And then you start making decisions well, maybe we could collaborate with those people because it's not a competition anymore, right? There's more than enough for all of us. So we work together as much as we can, whether that's here locally or in Guatemala. So yeah, I think that's the majority of the things. I did want to share that I think for you guys, I wanted to just throw out a few things. How are we doing on time? And I want to leave some time for Q&A. And mainly it's this poem. I found this poem to be really helpful by Rumi, if you've ever heard of Rumi. For me, as I was choosing new models and trying to replace those voices, the mystics were really helpful for me because it left things open and a little mysterious and a little magical. So this poem by Rumi, I think when I was at my lowest part of the U-shaped journey, gave me some courage, and it says this: inside this new love, die. Your way begins on the other side. Become the sky. Take an axe to the prison wall. Escape. Walk out like somebody suddenly born into color. Do it now. You're covered with thick cloud. slide out the side. Die and be quiet. Quietness is the surest sign that you've died. Your old life was a frantic running from silence. The speechless full moon comes out now. So hopefully that's for one of you or two of you this morning. So yeah, thank you. And I'd love, if you guys have any questions, we'd love to do that now. All right. Yes?
Hey, thank you so much. That was just incredible.
You're welcome.
This is my first time at one of these events, and I can't believe I've done that before. My question for you, maybe it's like kind of too big picture and philosophical, but you talked about changing your operating system. And I'm wondering, like, do you think it's really possible to change your operating system? You know?
Yeah.
Can you, like, maybe learn new ways? Like, can you really change it? And
Yeah.
then the other thing I just wanted to point out is, like, as I'm hearing you talk about your new-shaped journey, I'm, like, seeing this view behind you. And it's, like, this great pictorial representation of what you're talking about. Anyway.
Yeah. Could you guys hear the question? She's asking, like, is it really possible, or how can you change your operating system? So I would say the Enneagram would say a couple things. It would say that I'm a type 1 by nature or nurture, who knows, but there's a healthy and an unhealthy type 1, and there's a whole spectrum there. So I will always be a type 1 according to the Enneagram, but based on what are, for my particular type, meditation's great because I'm not trying to produce and I'm not trying to earn anything, I'm just being still. That helps me look more like a healthy type 7, my area of growth. So it would say that you're always your true essence, but you can be a healthy or unhealthy perfectionist. When I'm unhealthy, I'm very critical, I'm perfectionistic, I'm telling people how they can do things better, that the world's broken and I need to go fix it, and it's very urgent. When I'm healthy, I can relax, I can sleep in, I can leave the dishes in the sink, and I can act a little bit more like my wife. I think the other thing that I think the Enneagram hits at, but some other, let me share, Girard, I think, talks a lot about this. Ken Wilber is another. Integral Theory is, Integral Meditation is a great book. They would say that there's this false self that we spend the first half of our lives kind of edifying and putting out to the world and trying to get likes, you know, and all of these things that we do to feel accepted and to belong. And then there's a true self. And how, you know, in my particular example, I was always ignoring my true voice to try and, like, put the thing out there that people were going to like or they were going to accept. I still default back there a lot, so it's almost like they're always in tension. So I don't know if that answers your question, but cool. And I have to say that as an artist, and you guys probably experienced this, like there's a tendency and a temptation to, like, work towards the trend and put out the thing that you know people will like or you know that will sell. And even when your gut, or you might be a heart person or a head person, wherever you operate, might be saying to do something else. So I think part of trusting yourself enough to say, I'm going to put this thing out there, even people might hate it, but it's still like, I need to say this, right? Trust in that. I think that if nothing else, you've been faithful to yourself. So, other questions?
I assume that you can't do your own tattoos on your body and all that, so is that like a political decision?
Yeah.
Who gets to do your work or
Yeah.
that choice? That's probably a loaded.
Yeah, that's a great question because it really puts me to the test, right? His question was, I can't technically, I can, I've done a few on myself, but most places you can't tattoo yourself, so does that become a political decision on who tattoos you? My political answer is that all the folks in White Whale tattoo me, so I do trust them. But also, like this piece here, which I'm very proud of, is a local artist named Corey Flatmo. Corey's been around for 25 years, and I can't say that I did cross my mind that, like, if I get Corey's work on me, then, like, Corey's gonna get more work, you know, because I'm human, right? And I have that default in me. But Corey is an excellent artist. He's, so yeah, there are artists now who I really want to travel around the world and build vacations around collecting art. The older you get, you have less real estate, so you get more thoughtful about what goes where. Thanks.
So
So I imagine a lot of your clients will come to you and they'll have like a really, really specific idea. How do you kind of balance between the commitment they have to their idea versus your integrity as an artist if it's something maybe you don't necessarily agree with or want to sort of consult with them and make it better?
Yeah, how do I balance the commitment to my art and then the idea of someone who brings a tattoo idea? That's a great question. Typically what I ask for in a proposal is there's a lot of information I ask for because like what are the must-have elements, or what are there reference photos that you would like me to pull in or to look at? And you know, there are things that would make great tattoos that I turn down because I don't feel like it's aligning either with where I am at the time or maybe just something that's just not resonating with me. So I think when people come to me, they're looking for that particular woodcut pointillism kind of thing, and there's a little bit of trust there. Folks don't actually see the piece until they show up for the appointment. And I didn't think that would work, but that's how I work really well that way, just in the morning. I meditate on that piece, and I draw that piece, and then we tattoo it. And a few times we had to make some amendments. So I think it's like really kind of educating folks about commissioning an artist and then trusting in what they come up with. And still having an out, right? Like they can show up and be like, that doesn't work for me, and that's happened, so.
Obviously, you don't have the opportunity to correct mistakes when you're working on the human body. How do you train for that? I guess how do you practice to become a tattoo artist?
Yeah. My apprenticeship, I had a very traditional apprenticeship where I was welding needles to a bar. I had to build my own machine from scratch, and I couldn't touch human skin. I didn't know if this was going to take 6 months or 2 years. And I came in about 6 months after tattooing oranges and all kinds of things and showing I could kind of demonstrate that mastery of the line work. And I really had a strict teacher who would not let me touch skin until I could master that line work. So it took a while to get into that space where I could do that. So I came in one morning and he's like, "You're gonna do your first tattoo today." And I was like, "Really? Awesome." And I'm like, "On who?" And he said, "On me." So to tattoo your master, the pressure there was just off the charts. So, and you know, you really can do some trauma to skin, and I see a lot of scarred up tattoos, unfortunately. And he was a great teacher. I mean, it was almost therapeutic because he was so light on the skin. So, yeah. And then you know, you have a few that blow out, and you're like, it was just like the ink kind of fuzzes out a little bit, and so there's really no other way around it. I had about 10 friends who offered themselves to me for my first 10 tattoos and got very simple designs, so you work progressively harder and harder. Yeah, thanks. Any other questions? Yeah.
You talked a lot about this idea of abundance, and there is enough in the world, and I was wondering if, like, where that came from. Like, did you think of that yourself, or is there something in a book or a poem or something?
Yeah. For me, it was a very tortured 30-something years of just like digging through books and asking really hard questions of really gracious mentors. I would say there's a book called The Master Key System that has been helpful for me. There's a lot of books that are kind of connected in and around that book of like law of attraction stuff, and that stuff can get kind of weird. But for me, it was at least a helpful barometer to like bounce off my old self with, if that makes sense. So I do recommend that book. There's a book called Deep that I really love, and I was just in Mexico with my wife, and we got to explore the idea of free diving, which is what this book's about. But what the book is really about is the things that we're capable of as humans that we're convinced, I mean, we have scientists telling us, if you go deeper than 70 meters, your lungs are going to explode and you're going to die. And free divers are now diving 200 meters, and they're going further than that. And so they're actually pushing science, and they have studied and found these communities where these older Japanese women are diving and staying underwater for like 14, 15 minutes on one breath. No scuba gear, just one breath. So we took this course, and the first time I held my breath in static apnea, the record for that's documented is about 12 and a half minutes. And I did 3.5 minutes. I was pretty proud of that. My trainer was up to about 6 minutes. But when I did that, And then we went to this beautiful cenote in Mexico, and we were diving. And to get from this point to that wall, under a bunch of mangroves, I would have never tried that before. But now I know that that only takes about a minute, and I can hold my breath for 3.5 minutes. So we got to push ourselves and do more things. So I'd highly recommend that book. I could go on and on about the books, and I'd be happy to share that with you later. But for me, when I haven't found that physical mentor who can teach me, then it's usually I find it in books or podcasts. Yeah.
So we talked about like a tattoo being a commitment.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on a tattoo meaning something versus going into a shop, picking it off the wall?
Yeah. Yeah, my thoughts on that, I think there's something great about the folks who are able to come in and just pick something and they're just having fun and it's seemingly random. I personally, most of my tattoos represent part of my journey. One of the reasons I got into tattooing was I really appreciated that it was one of the only things in our culture that is almost like a ritual or a rite of passage. If you come from maybe a Jewish culture or heritage, or other heritages have these kind of built-in things, and I didn't really have that. I felt like a lot of my life was kind of chaos. So for me to go get a tattoo was like that rite of passage. So when I do it, I'm thinking about that thing that is symbolic and beautiful, and but not everybody does, and that's great too. Yeah. All right, anybody else? I think we have, yeah.
You mentioned that low point, and that was kind of a transition for you, but obviously it's not black and white, like there was that moment where everything's up and up from then on. So how do you deal with that transition, and there's points where perfectionist and unhealthy perfectionist starts to come back and
Yeah.
show its face?
Yeah, how do I deal with like when perfectionism starts to come back, and then the transition from between those two operating systems? It has been a very long journey, and so when we started to decide to open the tattoo studio, that was the dream, and we gave ourselves that blessing to do that. I was still working full time. I was doing administrative stuff for Teach for America, and then tattooing on the side. And it was really a hustle. And then we sold a house that we really loved because we had equity in it, so we could buy another building because Vladimir Putin was only taking cash offers. So when it shows up today, it's usually meditation. And Becky is really great at saying, hey, like that perfection critical stuff's coming out. Like, I have a very strict calendar. I say that, but I don't always keep it. But I have realized that because what I do, I have to bring my A game every time. I need that time in the morning to meditate or do yoga or go to the gym. And I'm even learning I need to craft my schedule even better. But if I don't do that, if I overwhelm myself and overbook myself, then I get to a pretty unhealthy place again. And it's not fun, so, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Have you noticed, I don't know how old your kids are, but have you noticed that your behavior or your commitment to this very permanent thing has had an influence on them, or anything that you've picked out with their personalities that they're cleaning from you?
That's a great question. Have I noticed how my profession and commitment in tattooing has an effect on my kids? Last night, my first thing that comes to mind, my daughter had 2 of her friends over, so a bunch of 12-year-old girls, and they really wanted to come down to the tattoo shop and put stencils on and take pictures to post. Yeah, so I really want them to wait till they're 18. I had to wait till I was 18 to get a tattoo, and I still am not crazy about that tattoo, so if I could push that further. But it is part of my journey at the same time, so I do appreciate that, and that's why I haven't covered it up. They want tattoos, and they're always talking about what their tattoos will be. But they're brilliant kids, and I think they're going to make good choices. We'll see, at least in terms of tattoos. Yeah, thanks. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, anything about the Guatemalan way of life or culture that has helped me? Guatemala is a magical place. The Mayan culture is still very prevalent. There's live volcanoes everywhere you drive. It's about the size of Ohio, so you can be at the Caribbean or the Pacific in short time. That's a really great question. I'd love to think more about that. But I think just the people there, despite their fear of North America and the power we hold over them, can be so welcoming and so giving. And people who would take us into their tiny home in Basurero and just share whatever they had blew my mind. And the happiness that was there too, like it just was so incredible. So I have to think about that more. Jeremy, I'm colorblind, so I don't know what color that is. One more question. This is why I work in black, by the way. Anybody else? We have time for one more. Okay, Katie.
What do you look for in tattoo artists at your shop?
What do I look for? I want someone who is almost like a shaman, you know? Like I want that person to be able to provide that ritual, to be able to execute incredible, beautiful art, which all of them do effortlessly. They're amazing. But also that integrity, that bedside manner is very important to me in this process. So that's a big part of it. And they're amazing. If you get tattooed by any of them, I promise you it'll be a great experience. Cool. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to keep hanging out.